This video is brought to you in partnership with Novartis. There's nothing magical about my favorite superheroes. Through either great detective work or ingenious technology or radical science experiments, they become superhuman with traits and technologies that are seemingly within our grasp. And one of these radical transformations is closer than you may think. Let's get technical. Outside of being a genius detective who hides in a cave or a genius engineer who builds a rocket suit, also in a cave, there isn't a whole lot of room for the average person to realistically become superhuman. That is, unless you have some of this stuff. This is super serum, and you can find it in many different forms across super media. But basically, super serum is some concoction of ingredients that takes the average person, and makes them superhuman. But what could possibly be inside something like this to take you from zero to hero?
Oh, come on, let's go with the stuff.
First, we know what's probably not going to be in a true superhero serum. It's likely not going to be a single chemical, because the body is just far too complicated for anything like this to be that easy. And even if a single chemical did produce some amazing short-term effects, they would likely be temporary, because unless these changes are something the body would do on its own, any chemical inside your body will be eventually depleted and excreted. No, a serum able to turn you from a skinny guy willing to jump on a grenade into a hero that understands that reference is gonna need to make your superness something that the body would do on its own. And that means starting with the blueprint of life, your DNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, is a twisted ladder of a molecule that carries the instructions for the growth, development, proper functioning, and reproduction of every organism on the planet. DNA sits twisted up in the nucleus of all of your cells in collections that we call chromosomes. A complete set of human DNA contains around 3 billion bases, the rungs on this twisted ladder that act like the programming language of our bodies. The 4 nitrogen bases that make the rungs on our ladder and link the 2 helical strands of DNA together form sequences called genes. Our cellular machinery takes these genes and their information and uses that to code for proteins, which are responsible for so much of what our body does. This gene here might code for eye color, or it could code for something like muscle mass. So if we wanted to fundamentally change how the human body functions, we should start here with the code that it's reading. Pop culture has actually followed the science of genetics and advances in personalized medicine. If you've paid attention to how science fiction has turned normal humans into supervillains and superheroes over the years, you'll notice that the mechanisms have gotten a lot more plausible. The days of radiation turning you into some kind of monster are just over, because since the early 20th century, when many of our favorite characters were first thought up, we've simply learned too much about how the body actually works for these more brute force explanations to make sense. Instead, most modern superhero stories have indeed pivoted towards genetic and gene-based explanations for their superheroes. What was once a radioactive bug bite, for example, is now a genetically augmenting bug bite. The most realistic way towards superhuman traits like strength and speed is going to be through our genes. Which bug was that? Was that the radioactive bug or the genetic bug? Because there's a big difference. Your genes don't just code for how your kidneys are shaped or what hair color you may have. A few tweaks to your blueprint could make you superhuman. I kind of like it. It's not that bad. But let's just get one thing out of the way first. When I say making someone superhuman, I don't mean giving someone the ability to shoot flames out of their hands or punch through a brick wall or something. No, there are just real physical limits on what a human body can do. I mean altering someone's genetic code in such a way to give them superhuman traits that will go beyond the average person in ways that a superhero would. Obviously, though, doing this kind of thing is unethical, especially considering a doctor's oath to do no harm, and there are potential harms here. That being said, hear me out. Let's begin here on human chromosome 2 at position 32.2 precisely. Here you will find the MSTN gene, which codes for a protein called myostatin. Myostatin is a muscle growth inhibitor, meaning that it keeps muscle cells in check. Therefore, organisms with mutations that inactivate this gene, or that are bred or engineered to not have this protein, can get, pretty beefy. For example, the Belgian blue cow is bred to have inactivating mutations in its MSTN gene and therefore get ridiculously ripped. And in the lab, there are mice that have had their myostatin producing genes knocked out, and so they get buffed, the little buff mice. And these ridiculous results come from a single genetic change. Muscle mice. Now just imagine a super serum that could break your MSTN gene in a similar way. Your muscle mass would increase, your body fat would decrease, and you'd feel stronger than ever before. And we know this would happen in humans because it occasionally happens in humans naturally. Children born lacking myostatin, and they can do pull-ups when they're 3. Most people can't do 3 pull-ups. There are other potential ingredients in a more realistic super serum too, like human growth hormone, insulin-like growth factor 1, and vascular endothelial growth factor, just to name a few. Tweaked genes could make you faster, stronger, and tougher, and the process wouldn't be as hard as stepping into a chamber and being bombarded by peck-enlarging peck rays? Sure. A real superhero serum could work like this. Say we want to affect some cells in the body and the DNA in the nucleus of those cells. First, we need some kind of vector, like a virus. We can use science to hollow out these viruses and then insert the DNA that we want to express into those viruses. We then put those viruses into a serum-like form and we inject it into somebody. Then those viruses find their way naturally to the cells that we want to have the DNA inside, and then as viruses do, they enter those cells and the cell starts reproducing this additional DNA all on its own. With a little bit of luck and a lot of science, this reproduced DNA will then start making the proteins that can start creating the superhuman-like traits that we want in some persons, say increased strength or speed. We could make a super serum like this today that could be effective. But should we? There's just no getting around the science here. Altering DNA in real life is risky, and if you're doing so just to get super, just to enhance human performance, it's also unethical. We are using super serums today, but we're using them like a real hero actually would, to save lives. I am partnering with Novartis for this video because, as in previous videos, I want to highlight real scientists doing real research right now that was once reserved only for science fiction. Using similar cell and gene technologies that movies and comic books have used to turn people superhuman, researchers at Novartis are reprogramming cells at the genetic level to fight one of the real arch villains of human life, disease, and some terrible diseases in particular. It is estimated that around 10,000 human diseases are caused by problems with a single gene. These monogenic disorders like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy and sickle cell anemia are debilitating and destructive, but because they are caused by malfunctioning in single genes, we know exactly how to fight back. Think of how we conventionally treat disease. Oftentimes there's some intervention, like a drug in pill form that we take, and we have symptoms recede for as long as we take that intervention, but we haven't fundamentally changed how the body functions. The promise of altering cells through gene therapy is that if we can fundamentally alter someone's genetic code, we might be able to come up with a treatment that could be a one-time cure for what ails them. But you wouldn't eat the DNA, that's not how that works. Right now, Novartis scientists are working on 3 approaches to cell and gene therapy that certainly evoke super serums. The first technology is called AAVs, or adeno-associated viruses, which are viruses, that have been found in humans and other primates, and most importantly for cell and gene therapy, they aren't known to cause any disease. We can hollow these viruses out and then insert genes into them and have them deliver our genetic treatments for us. And notice this is exactly how we imagined a more realistic super serum might work. Right now, Novartis is using AAV technology to come up with potential treatments for eye disorders, neurological disorders, and especially monogenic diseases. Grenade! Whew, I could do that all day. You good? Another approach to cell and gene therapy that Novartis is using involves a technology that you've probably already heard of, Crispr, or clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. It's a complicated acronym, but CRISPR is basically a sequence of DNA that we found in bacteria that can act like a molecular scissors, and we can program it to cut DNA wherever we want in any organism. We use this ability to inactivate certain genes, or we can use it to open up sections in DNA to insert the genes that we want. One goal that Novartis has for this technology is to take malfunctioning cells and DNA out of patients and then use this technology to repair those cells and DNA and then return them to the patient to hopefully treat diseases like sickle cell anemia. A third approach is Carty, or Chimeric Antigen Receptor T-cell therapy. For this, a patient's own T-cells, immune system cells, are taken out of the body and then reprogrammed to identify certain dangerous antigens, like those identifiable with cancer. And then those cells are returned to a patient's body, hopefully giving the T-cells the information they need to identify something like a cancer cell and then fight back. The ability for a technology to fight something like cancer means that all of these cell and gene technologies aren't just for super rare genetic disorders, and the possibilities for these go far beyond even what we've talked about here today. So I'm just gonna take this with me for not reasons. So, how do you make a real super serum? Well, I think we can be pretty confident that it will have something to do with reprogramming our cells and rewriting our own blueprint. This is a real superhuman way of giving someone their life back, and we're working on this right now. These are the real super serums, because science. Thanks again to Novartis for collaborating with me on this video. Novartis uses science-based innovation to address some of society's most challenging healthcare issues. They discover and develop breakthrough treatments and find new ways to deliver them to as many people as possible.